Hey guys, tonight we're taking a deep dive into the culinary adventures of one of history's most formidable empires, the Mongols. Imagine, if you will, the vast, wind-swept steppes, the thundering hooves of 1,000 horses, the scent of wood smoke mingling with something distinctly meaty. You're not just a passive observer. You're right there, feeling the chill of the Mongolian air, hearing the distant bleating of sheep, perhaps even dodging a stray yak. This isn't your typical sit-down dinner party, by the way. If you're thinking white tablecloths and tiny forks, you're in for a rude awakening. You'll probably get trampled by a horse or acquire a taste for fermented mare's milk you didn't know you needed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our adventure into the Mongol feasting begins not with a banquet hall, but with the very ground beneath their feet, or rather, the lack thereof. You see, the Mongols weren't building permanent cities or sprawling farms. Their entire existence was a symphony of movement, a nomadic ballet across the vast, unforgiving Eurasian steppes. This wasn't just a lifestyle choice. It was an absolute necessity dictated by the land itself. The steppes, while seemingly endless, offered sparse, seasonal pastures. To feed their immense herds, their very lifeblood, they had to constantly follow the grass, migrating with the seasons. Spring saw them in northern pastures, summer higher up in the mountains, autumn back down, and winter often in sheltered river valleys. It was a yearly pilgrimage, a grand, mobile ecosystem of humans and animals, and this constant motion, this perpetual state of being on the move, was the bedrock, the very foundation of every single aspect of their feasting traditions. Think about it for a moment. If your entire kitchen, pantry, and dining room are packed up and moved every few weeks or months, what does that do to your menu? Simplifies things, doesn't it? You can't exactly lug around a porcelain dinner set for 12, or a delicate soufflé dish, or even a full-sized oven. You couldn't even keep a consistent garden, which meant fresh vegetables were more of a rare treat, acquired through trade, rather than a dietary staple. Their feasting, therefore, wasn't about elaborate culinary techniques that required fixed infrastructure. It was about practicality, efficiency, and making the absolute most of what was readily available and, crucially, transportable. This nomadic existence meant that their diet was overwhelmingly dominated by animal products. You're living alongside your food supply, literally. Your breakfast, lunch, and dinner are grazing just outside your gur. That's their portable felt tent, by the way. This primary reliance on livestock, sheep, goats, cattle, camels, and of course, horses, meant that meat and dairy weren't just components of their meals. They were the meals. You'd find very little in the way of grains or vegetables in their daily diet unless they were obtained through trade or, later, conquest. It's a diet that, frankly, makes modern keto enthusiasts look like carb loaders. The practicalities of constant movement also meant that preservation became an art form, a critical skill passed down through generations. You can't just pop down to the corner store for a fresh cut of meat when you're days or even weeks away from the nearest trading post. So, they mastered techniques like drying meat into borts, a sort of super concentrated jerky that could be stored for incredibly long periods and rehydrated when needed. Imagine a steak that lasts for months in your backpack. That's some serious trail mix right there. They also fermented dairy products, turning fresh milk into things like arag, a slightly alcoholic, highly nutritious mare's milk, which was much more stable than fresh milk and a powerhouse of energy. These weren't just ways to make food last. They were central to their very survival and formed the core of their feasting. A feast wasn't just about fresh kill. It was about showcasing the bounty of their herds, preserved and prepared with skill and foresight. Even the way they cooked was shaped by their transient lifestyle. Forget your fancy gas ranges or electric ovens. Their cooking methods were ingenious, relying on what was universally available: fire, hot stones, and the earth itself. You'd witness the digging of subterranean pits, turning the ground into a natural oven, or the use of hot stones placed directly inside an animal carcass to cook it from the inside out. These methods were efficient, required minimal equipment, and could be set up and dismantled relatively quickly as the horde packed up and moved on. It's the ultimate leave-no-trace cooking, but with a whole lot more deliciousness. The emphasis on animal products also meant that every single part of the animal was utilized. Waste was not just frowned upon. It was practically a death sentence in the harsh steppe environment. Bones were cracked for marrow, hides were used for clothing and shelter, intestines for sausages, and even blood was consumed or used in dishes. This holistic approach to their food source wasn't just about making ends meet. It was deeply ingrained in their respect for the animals that sustained them. It's a level of nose-to-tail eating that would make even the most dedicated modern chef blush. Mainstream historical fact: the Mongol diet was so heavily reliant on animal products that archaeological findings often show signs of nutrient deficiencies in their settled populations compared to their nomadic ancestors, highlighting how specialized their nomadic diet truly was. This nomadic foundation also meant that their feasts weren't always about massive, sprawling banquets every single day. Daily meals were often simple, practical, and designed for sustenance. Feasts, then, became truly special occasions, marking significant events. Successful hunts, military victories, political gatherings, or seasonal transitions. They were moments to celebrate abundance, to reinforce social bonds, and to express gratitude. The very act of gathering and sharing a large meal was a profound statement of unity and prosperity in a life defined by movement and the unpredictable whims of nature. Historians still argue whether the frequency of these grand feasts increased or decreased significantly as the Mongol Empire expanded and absorbed more settled populations. And here's a quirky tidbit for you. Because they were always on the move, and because wood was scarce on the open steppe, the Mongols often used dried animal dung, known as argal, as their primary fuel source for cooking fires. Imagine inviting guests over and saying, "Don't mind the smell, it's just the ambience." But it was efficient, readily available, and burned hot enough for their needs. This resourceful use of every available material truly underscores their deep connection to their environment and their ingenious adaptability. In essence, the Mongol nomadic lifestyle wasn't just a backdrop to their feasting. It was the very blueprint. It dictated what they ate, how they prepared it, how they preserved it, and even when and why they celebrated. Every bite, every sip, every shared moment around a crackling fire was a testament to their incredible resilience and their mastery of life on the move. You couldn't separate the feast from the journey, because the journey was the feast, in its own rugged, magnificent way. All right, settle in, because if you thought setting up a backyard barbecue was a chore, you haven't seen anything yet. Imagine, if you will, being transported back in time, not to some cozy little village, but right into the heart of a sprawling, magnificent Mongol encampment, the Kurgal. It's not just a collection of tents. It's a living, breathing, temporary city that stretches further than your modern eyes could possibly comprehend. You're standing on the vast, open steppe, and the horizon itself seems to ripple with the white felt of countless jairs, those iconic round dwellings, dotting the landscape like giant, benevolent mushrooms. The air here isn't just air. It's a tapestry woven from the scent of dry earth, the subtle musk of horses, and the distant, promising hint of wood smoke, even before the main fires are truly roaring. This isn't just a casual picnic gathering. This is the preparation for a grand feast, a monumental undertaking that showcases the Mongols' unparalleled organizational skills. The scale is just immense. You might have seen pictures, but pictures don't quite capture the sheer, mind-boggling scope of it all. As you gaze out, you realize this isn't one tight cluster, but rather a carefully arranged constellation of smaller tribal units, each with its own cluster of jairs, all radiating outwards from the central, larger jairs of the Khan or the primary chieftains. It's like a meticulously planned festival ground, but for thousands upon thousands of people, all moving with a purpose that feels both ancient and incredibly efficient. If you've ever tried to coordinate a group of 10 friends for dinner, you'll appreciate the logistical genius at play here. The bustling energy is palpable, almost a low hum that vibrates through the very ground beneath your feet. It's not the frantic, chaotic energy of a city rush hour, but rather a purposeful, rhythmic movement, like a well-oiled machine made of flesh and felt. You see figures everywhere, moving with practiced ease. Women in their distinctive deal robes move between jars, their movements fluid and economical, carrying bundles of felt or large leather containers that slosh gently with liquids. Children, surprisingly disciplined but still full of youthful exuberance, chase after stray dogs or help with smaller tasks, their laughter occasionally bubbling up above the general din. The men, for their part, are often engaged in heavier labor, directing the positioning of the larger communal jars, or perhaps preparing the ground for the vast cooking pits that will soon be the fiery heart of the feast. One of the first things you notice, beyond the sheer number of people, is the meticulous way the camp is being prepared. This isn't just pitching a tent and calling it a day. Oh no, this is an elaborate, multi-stage process. Imagine the ground being cleared, not just for jars, but for vast, open-air communal cooking areas. You see groups of people, often women and older children, working together to flatten patches of earth, sometimes laying down extra layers of felt or hides to create cleaner, more comfortable spaces for sitting and eating. It's like they're laying out a giant, organic tablecloth across the steppe itself. The air is thick with the scent of fresh earth being disturbed, mingling with the dry, grassy perfume of the steppe. Then there's the fuel. Oh, the fuel! On the open steppe, wood is a precious commodity, often scarce. So what do? You adapt, of course. You'd witness the methodical gathering of argil, dried animal dung, primarily from horses and sheep. Now, before you wrinkle your nose, let me assure you it's surprisingly efficient and burns with a clean, hot flame, often with minimal smoke. It's like nature's perfectly prepackaged briquettes. Piles of these dried patties, looking remarkably like giant, rustic cookies, are being stacked near designated cooking spots. It's a job that requires considerable effort, and you'll see teams of people, young and old, diligently collecting and transporting these vital fuel sources. It's a testament to their resourcefulness. They weren't just conquerors, they were masters of sustainable living, long before it became a hashtag. As the sun climbs higher, casting long, sharp shadows, the preparations intensify. Large, sturdy wooden carts, known as kibitkas, which are essentially wheeled jars or transport wagons, are being moved into position, sometimes serving as temporary storage or even impromptu prep stations. These carts were ingeniously designed to be pulled by oxen or horses, making the Mongol horde incredibly mobile, a fact that both baffled and terrified their enemies. Historians still argue whether the speed at which these massive encampments could be struck and re-erected was a more significant tactical advantage than the prowess of their cavalry. It's a fascinating debate, isn't it? Was it the horses, or the ability to essentially teleport an entire city? Water, too, is a critical component of any feast, especially one of this magnitude. You'll see lines of people, often women, making trips to the nearest river or well, carrying large leather containers or wooden buckets. The rhythmic slosh of water, the low murmurs of conversation, and the occasional splash as a container is filled contribute to the ambient soundscape. It's a constant, vital flow, reminding you that even in this vast, open space, resources are carefully managed. No waste, no fuss, just efficiency. The jars themselves are also undergoing a transformation. Inside, the felt rugs and cushions are being shaken out, cleaned, and rearranged to accommodate more guests. You might catch a glimpse of vibrant patterns and rich colors on the textiles, a stark contrast to the often monochromatic landscape outside. The central hearths within the jars, usually used for daily cooking and warmth, are being prepared for the smaller, more intimate cooking tasks that complement the larger communal efforts. It's a bit like preparing your kitchen for a big holiday dinner, except your kitchen is a portable, felt-covered dome, and your guest list numbers in the thousands. A quirky detail you might observe is the careful attention paid to the orientation of the jars. Traditionally, the door of a gur always faces south, a practice rooted in both practical sun tracking and spiritual beliefs. When setting up a kurgal, this alignment is meticulously maintained across hundreds, if not thousands, of dwellings, creating a subtle, almost invisible order within the apparent sprawl. It's a quiet nod to their deep connection with the natural world and ancient traditions, a sort of built-in compass for the entire camp. You can almost feel the collective breath being held in anticipation. The air is charged with a quiet excitement. Everyone knows what's coming. a time of bounty, community, and celebration. The preparations are not just chores. They are the prelude to joy, a communal effort that strengthens the bonds of the horde even before the first morsel is consumed. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the steppe in hues of gold and orange, the initial phase of preparation winds down. The structures are in place, the fuel is gathered, the water is secured. The rhythmic sounds of construction begin to fade, replaced by a different kind of hum, one of eager expectation. The air, once filled with dust and the scent of raw earth, now carries the faint, tantalizing promise of cooking fires soon to be lit, of meat soon to be roasted, and of mare's milk soon to be fermented. You can practically taste the anticipation. It's a magnificent sight, this temporary city, built for a feast, ready to burst into life. Now, as you settle deeper into your imaginary saddle, feeling the cool steppe wind on your face, we begin to understand the very cornerstone of any grand Mongol feast, the hunt. Before a single pot could simmer or a single fire could blaze for a celebration, the provisions had to be gathered, and in the vast, open lands of the Mongol Empire, that meant one thing: the hunt. It wasn't just a casual outing with a bow and arrow, oh no. Imagine, if you will, the sheer logistics of feeding tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people. It's not like you could just send a runner to the nearest supermarket. No, this was an operation on an epic scale, a truly monumental undertaking that set the stage for every joyous bite. Your journey into this culinary prelude begins not with the clatter of kitchenware, but with the quiet, almost reverent preparations for what the Mongols called a nurge. Picture the sprawling encampment, the kurgal, not just buzzing with anticipation for a feast, but subtly shifting its focus towards a strategic endeavor. Commanders would be huddled over maps drawn in the dirt, their fingers tracing the contours of the land, planning the vast encirclement. Horses, thousands upon thousands of them, would be readied, their shaggy coats brushed, their tack inspected. You'd hear the rhythmic thwip-thwip of bowstrings being tested, the soft clink of quivers being filled with arrows tipped with bone or iron. It's a quiet hum of purposeful activity, a deep breath before the grand exhale of the hunt itself. The nurge was far more than just a way to get dinner on the table. It was a masterclass in coordinated movement, discipline, and strategic thinking. Think of it as the ultimate team-building exercise, but with much higher stakes and a lot more running. This wasn't your grandpa's deer blind. This was an entire army, sometimes every able-bodied man, woman, and even older child, participating in a vast living net. You'd feel the crisp, early morning air as you mount your sturdy steppe pony, joining a line of riders that stretches so far you can barely see the ends of it. The sun, just peeking over the horizon, casts long, dancing shadows across the endless grasslands. You're part of a massive, slowly moving crescent, sometimes hundreds of miles wide, designed to sweep across the steppe, pushing every living creature before it. As the days, sometimes even weeks, wear on, this colossal human and horse wall would gradually tighten. You'd ride for hours, maintaining your position, a silent, disciplined cog in a vast, living machine. The goal? To funnel every gazelle, every wild ass, every marmot, and yes, even the occasional wolf or wild boar, into a central enclosure. Imagine the patience required. No sudden movements, no loud shouts, just the steady, inexorable advance. It's like herding cats if the cats were incredibly fast, numerous, and occasionally prone to trying to break through your lines. And break through they would try. You'd see the dust clouds rising in the distance as herds of skittish antelope stampeded, only to be turned back by a line of riders, their lances held steady, their horses expertly maneuvered. It's a ballet of controlled chaos, a testament to the Mongols' unparalleled horsemanship and their collective will. And what about those jokes I promised? Well, one might be the sheer relief on a hunter's face when, after days of riding in perfect formation, the target animals actually stay within the ever-shrinking circle. It's a lot of work for a meal, let me tell you. Another might be the occasional, utterly bewildered expression on a marmot's face, suddenly finding itself surrounded by an entire horde. Excuse me, it might squeak. Is this for me? The tension would build with each passing day as the circle grew smaller, the animals denser. You'd start to hear the distant bleating, the thud of hooves, the low growls of predators also caught in the sweep. The air would become thick with dust and the scent of wild animals. Eventually, the outer ring would meet the inner ring, forming a vast living corral. And then the signal would be given. At first, only the high-ranking nobles and the most skilled hunters would be allowed inside the circle. This was not just about provisioning. It was also a display of skill, a chance for the elite to prove their prowess. You'd watch as arrows flew with deadly accuracy, lances found their mark, and the chosen few demonstrated their mastery over the wild. It was a spectacle of power and precision. Historians still argue whether the Nurge was primarily a military exercise disguised as a hunt, or a hunt that conveniently doubled as military training. What's undeniable, though, is its dual purpose. Every maneuver, every command, every disciplined formation used in the Nurge mirrored the tactics of the Mongol army in battle. It honed their communication, their coordination, and their ability to act as one cohesive unit, transforming chaos into order. It was a living, breathing drill, preparing them for the next conquest just as much as it prepared them for the next feast. As the initial, more selective phase of the kill concluded, the rest of the horde would be permitted to enter the enclosure. It was a time of controlled culling, ensuring that enough animals were taken to feed the entire host, but also ensuring that not every animal was slaughtered. A core principle of Mongol life was respect for nature and the avoidance of waste. They understood the delicate balance of the steppe ecosystem. Any animal that escaped or was deliberately allowed to pass through a specific gap was seen as a blessing, a sign of future abundance. This wasn't wanton slaughter. It was a strategic harvest. You'd see the swift, efficient work of processing the animals, the meat quickly sectioned, the hides carefully removed, every part utilized. Even the blood was collected for certain dishes, a testament to their philosophy of zero waste. And for a quirky little tidbit, sometimes during these massive hunts, a particularly defiant or clever animal, like a cunning wolf or a powerful wild boar, would be specifically targeted not just for meat, but as a test of skill and courage for a young warrior or a chief. It wasn't just about bagging dinner. It was about proving oneself against the most formidable creatures of the steppe. Imagine the bragging rights. "Oh, you caught a gazelle? That's nice. I, however, wrestled a boar the size of a small pony." So, you see, the hunt wasn't merely the beginning of the feast. It was an integral part of the entire Mongol way of life. It was a grand overture, a symphony of horsemanship, strategy, and sheer effort that provided the abundant provisions for the celebration to come. The success of the hunt directly correlated with the grandeur of the feast, and the memories forged during those long, dusty days on the steppe were just as vital as the meat they brought back. It was a communal effort that strengthened bonds, honed skills, and quite literally brought home the bacon, or, well, the wild ass. As you settled deeper into the soft cushions of your imagination, the sounds of the great encampment, the kurgal, begin to shift. The distant hum of preparation now gives way to a more visceral understanding of what truly filled the Mongol feasting tables. It wasn't just food. It was life itself, drawn from the vast, unforgiving, yet incredibly generous, steppe. You're about to witness a veritable Noah's Ark of culinary possibilities, all destined for the communal pot. First, and perhaps most profoundly, you must understand the horse. Not merely as a beast of burden or a swift war machine, but as the very heart of the Mongol diet. Imagine the sheer number, an endless, rippling ocean of manes and tails stretching to the horizon. These weren't just mounts. They were walking larders, providing sustenance in countless forms. Their milk, as we'll discuss later, was transformed into the potent arag. But their meat? Oh, their meat was a staple, a source of incredible energy and warmth in the harsh steppe climate. You'd see the prized ado, the horses, being led, not to battle, but to the feast. Their robust, slightly sweet, and surprisingly lean red meat was a cornerstone. Think of it as the ultimate ancestral protein bar, designed for constant motion. Forget your modern pre-workout shakes, the Mongols had horse. And let me tell you, it worked. The sheer stamina required for their nomadic lifestyle, for their conquests, was fueled by this powerful meat. A mainstream historical fact you'd quickly grasp is that the horse was not merely food, but a foundational element of Mongol survival and identity, revered even as it sustained them. To a Mongol, a horse was family, transport, and dinner all in one convenient, four-legged package. Beyond the noble steed, the most ubiquitous creatures you'd encounter are the sheep and goats. These are the unsung heroes of the Mongol larder, the reliable, ever-present source of daily nourishment. Picture flocks so immense they seem to blur into the landscape, a shifting, bleeding carpet across the grasslands. The Mongols, masters of animal husbandry, managed these herds with an efficiency that would make any modern rancher weep with envy. Sheep, with their fatty tails and rich, succulent meat, were the primary source of protein for everyday meals. Goats, hardier and more agile, provided leaner meat and milk, thriving in landscapes where even sheep struggled. You'd see them being expertly butchered, often with astonishing speed and minimal waste, directly within the encampment. Every part was utilized, from the tender cuts of mutton for stews to the rich fat for cooking and warmth. If horse meat was the celebratory main course, sheep and goats were the dependable, comforting, everyday bread and butter, or rather, the everyday meat and fat of the Mongol diet. They were the original fast food, always on demand, always delicious, and surprisingly eco-friendly for their time. Then there were the cattle, less common than horses or sheep in the core Mongol diet, especially in the most arid regions, but certainly present, particularly in more fertile areas. You'd see sturdy oxen, valuable for their strength in pulling carts and their hides, but also providing a substantial amount of meat for larger gatherings. Their milk, too, was used, though less culturally significant than mare's milk. Camels, the ships of the desert, were also part of the herd animals, though their meat was typically reserved for specific occasions or times of scarcity, and they were far more valued for their milk and incredible endurance in transport. It wasn't exactly a daily steak night with a side of camel hump, but they were there, a testament to the Mongols' adaptability in utilizing every available resource. Now, let's pivot from the domesticated to the wild, for the steppe was also a teeming larder of game. The great hunts, or nurge, were not just spectacles of skill and strategic genius. They were massive food-gathering operations. Imagine entire sections of the horde, spanning miles, acting as a human wall, driving thousands of animals into a central killing ground. It was like a prehistoric, very well-organized, and incredibly effective drive-through safari. You'd witness nimble gazelles, their slender forms leaping across the plains, their meat lean and quick cooking. Various species of deer, from the majestic red deer to the smaller roe deer, provided richer, more complex flavors, often prized for their specific cuts. Wild boars, dangerous and formidable adversaries, added a darker, more intense meat to the feast, a testament to the hunter's bravery and skill. These animals weren't just food. They were a challenge, a testament to the hunter's prowess, and their successful capture was a source of great pride. But for a truly quirky or fringe tidbit, let's talk about the marmot. Yes, the humble marmot. These plump, burrowing rodents were a surprisingly important part of the Mongol diet, especially for certain dishes like budog, which we'll explore later. They were hunted not just for their meat, which was rich and fatty, but also for their fat, which was prized for cooking and medicinal purposes. Picture a Mongol hunter patiently waiting by a marmot hole, perhaps with a specially trained eagle, or simply a good shovel. It's like the ultimate survival snack pack, pre-portioned and ready to go, if you can catch it. Historians still argue whether the consumption of marmots was primarily a practical matter of utilizing an abundant resource or if it carried specific cultural or ritualistic significance beyond mere sustenance. The debates continue, quietly, in dusty academic halls, while the marmots of today probably breathe a sigh of relief. And it wasn't just land animals. Near rivers and lakes, fish supplemented the diet, though perhaps less central than the meat of hoofed animals. Various fowl, from geese and ducks that congregated near water sources to bustards on the open plains, also found their way onto the feasting tables, adding variety and a lighter touch to the otherwise heavy meat diet. Even less conventional animals, like wolves, were sometimes consumed, particularly in times of extreme scarcity or for specific ritualistic reasons, though certainly not a preferred delicacy. The Mongols were nothing if not resourceful, ensuring no potential source of sustenance went untapped. So, as you survey the scene, you understand that the Mongol feasting table wasn't just a table. It was an entire ecosystem of protein. From the thundering herds of horses that formed the backbone of their existence to the fleet-footed gazelles and the unassuming marmots, every creature played its part. The sheer diversity of animals, both wild and domesticated, ensured that whether it was a daily meal or a grand celebration, the Mongol horde was always fed, always strong, and always ready for whatever the vast, open steppe or the next conquest might bring. The air thrums with the promise of hearty meals, prepared from the very bounty of the land they mastered so completely. You've seen the bounty, the sheer, overwhelming abundance of game and herd animals brought in by the hunters. But here's the thing about vast quantities of meat. It doesn't just sit there, patiently waiting to be eaten. Not in the sun-drenched, often unforgiving climate of the steppe, and certainly not when you're feeding a moving city of tens or even hundreds of thousands of people. This, my friend, is where the true genius of Mongol logistics and their mastery of food preservation begins to unfold. It's like watching a real-life historical episode of How It's Made, but with way more animal parts and a lot less conveyor belts. Imagine the scene. The hunt is over, the animals are dressed with an efficiency that would make a modern meatpacking plant blush. Now, you're faced with mountains of fresh protein. What do? Well, if you're a Mongol, you don't panic. You get to work because the very survival of the horde, its ability to move, to fight, to conquer, rests on your ability to transform perishable flesh into long-lasting sustenance. This wasn't just about avoiding hunger, it was about weaponizing food security. The primary method, the absolute rock star of Mongol meat preservation, was drying. They didn't call it jerky, but that's essentially what it was, only taken to an art form. The most famous example is borts, a staple that powered the Mongol war machine across continents. You'd see specialized teams, often women and older men, meticulously slicing the fresh meat into incredibly thin strips, almost transparent in their delicacy. Think of it like a prehistoric charcuterie board, but on an industrial scale. These strips, often from the hindquarters of horses or cattle for their lean muscle, would then be hung on ropes or wooden racks, exposed to the relentless sun and the constant, dry winds of the steppe. The air itself became an accomplice, wicking away moisture with astonishing speed. You can almost feel the dry air, the gentle breeze rustling through the strips of meat, slowly transforming them from glistening red to a dark, almost black, leathery texture. The sun, a silent, powerful oven, baked out every last drop of water. This process wasn't just about drying, it was about concentrating nutrients. A small piece of borts held the caloric punch of a much larger quantity of fresh meat. It was the original energy bar, a superfood designed for endurance. And if you thought meal prepping was a hassle, try doing it for an army the size of a small country, without a fridge or a food processor. Talk about a culinary Everest. The beauty of borts was its incredible lightness and durability. Once fully dried, it could be stored for years without spoiling. Imagine carrying your entire food supply for months in a small pouch, weighing next to nothing, yet providing all the energy you needed. This logistical marvel, the ability to carry vast amounts of highly nutritious, non-perishable food, was a mainstream historical fact that underpinned the Mongols' unparalleled military mobility. They didn't need elaborate supply lines for fresh provisions. Their food traveled with them. This freed them from the constraints that crippled other armies, allowing for lightning-fast campaigns that bewildered their enemies. Beyond just drying, other methods were employed, though perhaps less universally or on a smaller scale. Salting was another valuable technique, especially for cuts of meat destined for slightly different uses or when drying conditions weren't optimal, perhaps during a wet season. You'd see skilled hands rubbing generous amounts of salt into larger pieces of meat, creating a barrier against decay. These salted cuts might then be stored in hide sacks, or even buried in the cool earth to further preserve them. It offered a different texture and flavor profile, a welcome variation in a diet that could otherwise be quite monotonous. Smoking, while perhaps less common for bulk, long-term preservation than drying, was also utilized. Picture meat hanging within the confines of a simple structure, or even just over a slow-burning, smoldering fire, infusing it with that distinct smoky aroma and adding another layer of preservation. This method would often impart a richer flavor and a slightly different texture, perhaps reserved for specific cuts or for consumption over a shorter term. And then there was nature's own freezer, the brutal steppe winter. When temperatures plummeted far below freezing, the Mongols simply leveraged the environment. Meat could be left out in the sub-zero air, or even buried in the permafrost, effectively flash freezing it until needed. This was, of course, a seasonal solution, but an incredibly effective one, turning the harshness of winter into a massive natural cold storage unit. Imagine trying to explain best by dates to a Mongol preservationist. They'd probably just laugh and point to a piece of meat from last year's hunt, still perfectly edible. One particularly quirky or fringe tidbit about borts involves its ultimate form, meat powder. Some accounts suggest that borts could be pounded or ground into a fine powder. A spoonful of this concentrated meat dust, added to hot water, would instantly create a nourishing broth, a sort of ancient high-protein instant soup. This was the ultimate in compact, portable nutrition, allowing warriors to quickly rehydrate and replenish their strength with minimal fuss or cooking time. Think of it as the ultimate protein bar, but with way more historical street cred. The scale of this operation was simply staggering. When a large hunt brought in thousands of animals, the entire camp would transform into a meat processing hub. Every available hand would be involved, from the initial butchering to the meticulous slicing, hanging, and monitoring. The air would be thick with the scent of drying meat. Definitely not a Glade plug-in commercial, but a smell of industry and survival. This collective effort, this shared labor, reinforced the communal bonds within the horde, transforming a necessary chore into a shared endeavor. Historians still argue whether the Mongols preferred sun-drying over wind-drying in all climates, or if specific cuts were reserved for certain methods, and the precise methods used to prevent spoilage during humid periods. The nuances of their techniques, adapted to various terrains and seasons, remain a subject of fascinating debate among scholars. What is undeniable, however, is the sheer effectiveness of their methods. These preserved meats were the lifeline of the Mongol horde. They allowed them to travel vast distances without relying on vulnerable supply lines, to endure harsh winters, and to maintain their strength and vigor on long campaigns. When you consider the vastness of their empire, stretching across continents, much of that expansion was literally fueled by dried meat. It wasn't just about feasting. It was about the fundamental ability to sustain life and conquer empires, one perfectly preserved, nutrient-dense strip of meat at a time. The humble act of drying meat was, in essence, a cornerstone of their global dominance. The air, which just moments ago carried the crisp scent of the steppe and the faint, tangy aroma of preserved meat, begins to shift. A new scent, primal and inviting, starts to unfurl across the Kurgal, the sprawling encampment. It's the smell of wood smoke, of earth heating, of anticipation. You can almost hear the low hum of activity, the clink of stones, the murmur of voices as the Mongol horde prepares to transform their raw bounty into a feast. It's time to ignite the fires. Imagine the ground beneath your feet, not just a surface, but a canvas for culinary magic. One of the most iconic and, frankly, most impressive methods of cooking you'd witness is the use of subterranean pits, essentially massive earth ovens. It begins with the digging. Warriors, or perhaps those tasked with the communal preparations, would select a patch of earth, often near the heart of the encampment, and begin to excavate. Not just a shallow hole, mind you, but a substantial pit, perhaps a meter or two deep and wide, depending on the scale of the feast. It's hard work, the soil often compacted, but it's a necessary first step in unlocking flavors that only slow, consistent heat can achieve. Think of it as the original, very low-tech, slow cooker, except instead of a ceramic pot, you're using the very earth itself. Once the pit is dug, it's lined, not with fancy bricks or tiles, but with stones. River stones, often, chosen for their smooth surfaces and their ability to absorb and radiate heat without shattering. These stones are carefully placed, creating a natural, heat-retaining chamber. And then the fire. Not a quick, flimsy flame, but a roaring blaze, built right inside the pit. Dried wood, collected from distant oases or riverbanks, or perhaps even dried animal dung, known as argol, would be piled high. The flames would lick at the stones, turning them from dull gray to glowing red, superheating them for hours. You'd feel the warmth radiating from the ground, a testament to the intense heat being built deep within the earth. This process isn't rushed. It's a patient, deliberate act. The fire might burn for several hours, sometimes even half a day, ensuring the stones reach an optimal, almost incandescent temperature. Once the stones are thoroughly heated, the embers and ash are carefully removed. This is crucial. You want the heat, not the smoke or the direct flame, to cook the food. What's left is a glowing, subterranean cauldron of pure, radiant warmth. Now comes the bounty. The expertly butchered meat, perhaps a whole sheep or goat, or large cuts of horse, is carefully prepared. Sometimes it's wrapped in animal skins, or perhaps even large, hardy leaves if available, to protect it and seal in the juices. Other times, it might be placed directly into the pit, nestled amongst some of the superheated stones. Imagine the sizzle as the raw meat touches the scorching rock, the immediate release of steam, the first hints of browning. Vegetables, if any were available from trade or foraging, perhaps wild onions or garlic, might also be added, or even a little water or broth to create a steaming environment. The pit is then sealed. This is where the earth oven truly earns its name. Layers of earth, sod, and sometimes even a thick animal hide would be piled on top, effectively trapping all that precious heat and moisture inside. It's like creating a natural pressure cooker, ensuring the meat cooks slowly, evenly, and becomes incredibly tender. Then you wait, and waiting is part of the ritual. For hours, sometimes overnight, the earth works its magic. The heat slowly permeates the meat, breaking down tough fibers, rendering fat, and infusing every bite with a deep, smoky flavor that can only come from this ancient method. When the time comes for the unearthing, there's a collective excitement. The layers of earth are carefully removed, the hide pulled back, and a cloud of fragrant steam billows out, carrying the intoxicating aroma of perfectly cooked meat. It's a moment of triumph, a sensory explosion that signals the heart of the feast is ready. The meat, falling off the bone, is incredibly succulent, a testament to the power of the earth itself as a culinary tool. But earth ovens weren't the only trick up the Mongol culinary sleeve. Another ingenious method, often used in conjunction with or as an alternative to the pits, involved hot stones directly interacting with the food. This technique is particularly famous for dishes like budog, a whole animal, often a marmot or goat, cooked from the inside out, and korhog, meat and vegetables cooked in a sealed container with hot stones. The principle is simple yet effective. Smooth, non-porous river stones are collected, chosen carefully to ensure they won't shatter when heated. These stones are then placed directly into a roaring open fire, often for an hour or more, until they are glowing intensely hot. You can almost feel the heat radiating off them, even from a distance, a silent testament to the energy they're absorbing. Once incandescent, these stones are carefully and quickly transferred. For budog, they are inserted directly into the cavity of a deboned animal. Imagine the skill required to maneuver these scorching rocks inside a carcass, ensuring even distribution. The animal is then sealed, often by tying off its neck and legs. The internal heat from the stones cooks the meat from the inside, while the skin crisps on the outside from the residual heat and perhaps a gentle flame. The fat renders, basting the meat from within, creating an incredibly tender and flavorful result. It's a bit like having an oven inside your dinner. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of earth ovens was primarily a matter of fuel efficiency, a preference for specific textures, or a deeply ingrained cultural tradition passed down through generations of steppe nomads. For korhog, the hot stones are placed alongside chunks of meat and vegetables, if available, within a large, sturdy pot or even a milk can, which is then tightly sealed. The stones radiate heat, creating a steaming environment that gently cooks the ingredients. This method is brilliant because it uses very little external fuel once the stones are heated, relying on the trapped heat and moisture. It also creates a unique, almost stew-like texture, with the meat falling apart and the flavors melding beautifully. A quirky tidbit. After the meat is served, the hot stones, now coated in grease and flavor, are often passed around among the diners. People rub them on their hands, believing it's good for circulation and helps absorb the richness of the meal. It's a warming, communal ritual, a final, tactile connection to the cooking process. Just remember, these aren't your average skipping stones. Unless you want your dinner to skip right out of the pot and into the next yurt. Beyond these more elaborate methods, simpler techniques were also omnipresent. Large iron cauldrons, known as kazan or kazan, were indispensable tools. These massive pots, often suspended over open fires on tripods, were used for boiling vast quantities of meat, making hearty broths or simmering stews. A mainstream historical fact is that these kazans were central to the culinary traditions across the entire Eurasian steppe, from the Mongols to other nomadic groups, serving as the primary vessel for communal cooking. They were durable, portable, and efficient for feeding a large number of people. It's like the original set-it-and-forget-it crockpot, but if you forget it, the entire thing might just decide to have a spontaneous bonfire. Spit roasting, though perhaps less common for the largest feasts due to the sheer volume of meat, was certainly used for smaller cuts or entire birds. Imagine plump game birds or smaller animals slowly turning over glowing embers, their fat dripping and sizzling, creating a tantalizing aroma that would drift across the camp. And, of course, simple grilling over hot coals was always an option for quick, direct heat cooking, perhaps for thinner cuts of meat or freshly caught fish from a nearby river. The logistics of cooking for a horde were staggering. It wasn't just one pit or one cauldron. It was dozens, perhaps hundreds, all tended by dedicated individuals. The air would be thick with the rich scent of roasting meat, boiling broth, and wood smoke. The efficiency of these methods was key. The slow cooking of earth ovens meant less constant tending, freeing up warriors for other duties. The reliance on locally sourced fuel, whether wood or argal, demonstrated their profound understanding and adaptation to their environment. These ancient cooking methods weren't just about survival. They were about transforming raw sustenance into a shared experience, a ritual that bound the horde together, one delicious, slow-cooked bite at a time. You felt the earth rumbling with the preparations, smelled the wood smoke curling from the cooking fires, and now, as the sun dips lower, painting the vast steppe in hues of orange and purple, the true stars of the Mongol feast begin their grand unveiling. This isn't just about cooking. It's about a culinary spectacle, a deep-seated tradition that turns sustenance into a celebration of ingenuity and abundance. And at the heart of it all, two dishes reign supreme: the magnificent quorhog and the audacious boudog. Get ready, because your taste buds are about to go on a very ancient, very meaty adventure. First, let's talk about quorhog. Imagine, if you will, the ultimate stone barbecue, but instead of grilling over an open flame, the cooking happens inside a sealed pot, powered by glowing hot river stones. It's like a prehistoric pressure cooker, but with way more character and a distinct lack of digital timers. You watch as large cuts of meat, usually mutton, sometimes goat, or even beef, depending on the day's bounty, are carefully layered into a sturdy metal pot. These aren't dainty little cubes. We're talking about substantial chunks, often still on the bone, promising fall-apart tenderness. Alongside the meat, you might see onions, maybe some wild garlic, and a generous sprinkling of salt. If it's a modern quorhog, you might even spot carrots and potatoes, but back then it was mostly about the meat, the fat, and the few hardy root vegetables that could be foraged from the tough steppe soil. The real magic, though, lies with the stones. These aren't just any stones. They are smooth, fist-sized river rocks, heated in a roaring fire until they are almost incandescent, glowing with an inner warmth. With long tongs, or perhaps just very thick, calloused hands, these scorching stones are carefully placed among the layers of meat and vegetables in the pot. You hear the hiss and sizzle as they make contact, the initial release of steam a promise of the delicious transformation to come. Then, a small amount of water is added, just enough to create a steamy environment, and the pot is sealed tight. Sometimes it's placed directly over a low fire, other times it's buried in hot coals, allowing the intense heat from the stones within, combined with the external heat, to slow cook the contents to perfection. It's a patient process, taking hours, during which the rich aromas begin to waft through the air, tantalizing everyone within sniffing distance. Honestly, it's the kind of cooking that makes you want to lie down right there and take a nap just from the smell alone. When the quorhog is finally deemed ready, the lid is carefully lifted, unleashing a cloud of fragrant steam that carries the essence of tender meat and earthy goodness. The meat is so soft it practically melts off the bone, infused with the subtle mineral flavor from the hot stones. But the experience isn't over yet. The hot, greasy stones themselves are then carefully removed from the pot and passed around. It's a unique ritual. You take one of these smooth, warm stones and gently rub it in your hands. It's believed to be good for your circulation, for warming your internal organs, and perhaps, just perhaps, for absorbing some of that delicious, meaty essence directly through your palms. It's like a prehistoric hot stone massage, only instead of calming music, you get the sounds of a hungry horde, and instead of essential oils, you get mutton fat. Quite the upgrade, wouldn't you say? Now, if quorhog is the grand, communal pot roast, then boudog is its wilder, more dramatic cousin. This dish is not for the faint of heart, or for those who prefer their meals to arrive neatly deboned and pre-portioned. Boudog typically involves an entire animal, most often a marmot or a goat, cooked inside its own skin. Yes, you heard that right. It's the ultimate zero-waste cooking method, and frankly, a masterclass in anatomical deconstruction. The process begins with a skilled butcher making a precise incision, usually at the neck or sometimes the rear, and then, with incredible dexterity, removing all the bones from the animal's body without skinning it. Imagine trying to debone a chicken through its neck opening. Now scale that up to a goat. It's a bit like turning the animal into a fleshy, furry bag. Once deboned, the cavity is then filled with a medley of hot stones, those trusty river rocks again, along with onions, salt, and sometimes wild herbs. The opening is then meticulously sewn or tied shut, sealing in all the flavors and creating a natural pressure cooker. The filled carcass is then roasted over an open flame, often with a blowtorch-like action, ensuring the skin crisps up beautifully and the meat cooks evenly from the inside out, thanks to those internal hot stones. The sight of a whole, glistening animal, slowly rotating over the fire, its skin crackling and popping, is truly something to behold. It's a testament to the Mongols' resourcefulness and their deep connection to the animals that sustain them. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for cooking whole animals in their skin, like boudog, was purely practical for nomadic life or if it held deeper spiritual or ritualistic significance. Was it just about efficiency, or was there a symbolic reverence for the animal, cooked whole and unbroken? Regardless of the deeper meaning, the result is undeniably spectacular. When ready, the boudog is presented, its skin a crispy, savory shell, holding incredibly tender, succulent meat within. The aroma is intensely smoky and rich, a primal invitation to feast. This method, of course, was incredibly practical for nomadic life. It required no external cooking vessels other than the animal itself, minimized the need for water, and maximized the retention of precious fats and nutrients, a mainstream historical fact that underscores the Mongols' ingenious adaptability. Plus, let's be honest, it probably saved on dishwashing, which is always a bonus, even in a yurt. Both quorhog and boudog are slow-cooked marvels, yielding meat that is incredibly tender, juicy, and infused with a deep, earthy flavor. They are not everyday meals, mind you. These are celebratory dishes reserved for grand feasts, for welcoming important guests, for marking significant victories, or for the joyous passage of seasons. They embody the spirit of the Mongol horde, strong, resourceful, and utterly dedicated to making the most of what the land and the hunt provide. Eating these dishes isn't just about satisfying hunger. It's a communal act, a shared experience of abundance and connection, where hands reach into the communal pot or tear off a piece from the roasted animal, forging bonds over the simple, profound pleasure of a perfectly cooked meal. Just try not to fall asleep mid-bite. These feasts are known for their somniferous effects. Now, as the tantalizing aromas of roasted meats begin to waft through the Mongol encampment, drawing you closer to the heart of the feast, you'd soon discover that no Mongol gathering, no true celebration, was ever complete without a particular beverage. This wasn't just any drink. It was the very essence of their nomadic spirit, a symbol of their lifeblood and the heart of every cheer, arag. Imagine, if you will, being offered a bowl of this legendary concoction for the very first time. You might expect a simple, refreshing drink, perhaps a sweet fruit juice or a plain water. But what arrives is something altogether more alive. It's a pale, milky liquid, often with a slightly frothy head, served in a wooden or ceramic bowl. You might detect a subtle, tangy aroma, something akin to a very specific, slightly sour yogurt, but with an underlying, almost imperceptible fizz. This, my friend, is arag, or as it's sometimes known in other traditions, kumi's fermented mare's milk. And believe me, it's an experience. If you're thinking, fermented milk? From a horse? You're not alone. It's definitely an acquired taste for the uninitiated. A bit like that first sip of kombucha that makes you wonder if it's gone bad, only to realize, oh, this is intentional. The process of making arag is as ancient and integral to Mongol life as the horses themselves. It begins with the mares, those magnificent, sturdy creatures that were so central to the Mongols' very existence. During the summer months, when the mares are lactating, they are milked several times a day. This isn't a quick, mechanical process. It's a careful, almost reverent act. The milk, fresh and warm, is then poured into a special container called a kokor. This isn't just any old bucket. It's traditionally made from the hide of an animal, often a cow or a horse, meticulously prepared and smoke-cured. The leather itself, over time, contributes a subtle, earthy note to the fermentation, adding to the arag's unique character. Think of it like a very specific type of oak barrel for wine, but for milk. This is where a quirky, fringe tidbit comes in. The kokor isn't just a container. It's a living part of the process. The older the kokor, the richer and more consistent the fermentation, as beneficial bacteria embed themselves in the hide, acting as a natural starter culture. It's a bit like having a sourdough starter that's been passed down for generations, but for your beverages. Once in the kokor, the real magic begins. The milk isn't just left to sit. It's churned, vigorously, repeatedly, for hours on end. Imagine the rhythmic thwack 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 of a long wooden dasher plunging into the milk, aerating it, mixing it, encouraging the fermentation. This isn't just a chore. It's often a communal activity, passed down through generations. Women, especially, would spend significant portions of their day beating the arag, sometimes even singing or chanting to the rhythm of the churning. This constant agitation is crucial, as it prevents the milk from separating into curds and whey, instead creating a homogeneous, slightly viscous liquid that develops a mild alcoholic content, typically between 1 to 3%, though it can go higher. It's not meant to be a potent intoxicant in the same way as grain alcohol, but rather a refreshing, nourishing drink that offers a gentle, pervasive warmth. When you finally take that first cautious sip, you'll experience a complex symphony of flavors. There's an initial tartness, a clean, sour note that quickly gives way to a subtle sweetness. The effervescence, the tiny bubbles dancing on your tongue, adds to its refreshing quality, making it surprisingly thirst-quenching even with its creamy texture. It's light, yet substantial, providing both hydration and nourishment. It's packed with vitamins and probiotics, making it an incredibly healthy staple for a nomadic diet, especially when fresh produce was scarce. It's like the ultimate ancient superfood smoothie, if that smoothie also gave you a very, very gentle buzz. The cultural and social significance of arag truly cannot be overstated. It was far more than just a drink. It was a profound symbol of hospitality and connection. When you, as a guest, entered a Mongol yurt, the first thing you would invariably be offered was a bowl of arag. To refuse it would be a grave insult, a rejection of the host's generosity and a breach of ancient custom. You would accept the bowl, often with both hands, and traditionally, you might dip your ring finger into the arag and flick a few drops towards the sky as an offering to the spirits, a small gesture of reverence before taking your first sip. This act of offering arag to guests, to the sky, to the ancestors, cemented bonds and expressed goodwill. It was a tangible representation of the Mongols' belief in sharing and communal living. This wasn't just a courtesy. It was a ritual that underscored the very fabric of their society. At any feast, the flow of arag was constant, almost like a river of communal spirit. You'd see bowls being passed, refilled, and offered with quiet dignity. Toasts, often elaborate and heartfelt, would be made with arag, sealing agreements, celebrating victories, or simply honoring the bonds of brotherhood. It was the unifying beverage that lubricated social interactions, eased tensions, and fostered a sense of shared identity. Think of it as the ultimate social lubricant, but one that also keeps you hydrated and provides essential nutrients. It's hard to imagine a modern gathering where the main drink is also a complete meal replacement, but for the Mongols, arag often filled both roles. Historians still argue whether the precise alcoholic strength of arag remained consistent across different Mongol tribes and regions, or if it varied significantly based on the specific mare breeds, fermentation techniques, and the duration of the churning process. Some accounts suggest that certain arag could be quite potent, leading to lively, even boisterous celebrations, while others describe it as merely mildly intoxicating, more akin to a refreshing tonic. What is undeniable, however, is its pervasive presence. Marco Polo, the famous Venetian traveler, observed this mainstream historical fact firsthand during his time in the Mongol Empire, noting how the Mongols drink Mara's milk prepared in such a way that it seems to be white wine, and it is very good to drink. His surprise at its taste and effect highlights just how unique arag was to European palates. Beyond its role in grand feasts, arag was also a daily staple, sustaining the Mongols on their long journeys and during the harsh winters. It was their primary source of liquid calories, protein, and essential fats, especially when other foodstuffs were scarce. Imagine riding for days across the steppe, the sun beating down, and reaching for a cooling, slightly fizzy bowl of arag to quench your thirst and replenish your energy. It was the ultimate, portable, all-in-one survival drink. And yes, while it's incredibly nutritious, consuming vast quantities of arag at a feast could lead to, well, let's just say a lot of trips behind the nearest yurt. It's a testament to its palatability that they could drink so much of it. So, as you watch the Mongols raise their bowls in unison, the soft glow of the firelight reflecting off the pale liquid, you understand that arag is more than just fermented milk. It is the liquid manifestation of their nomadic ingenuity, their deep respect for their animals, and their profound sense of community. It is the taste of their history, their hospitality, and their enduring spirit, a drink that binds them together, sip by shared sip. While arag, that milky, tangy, effervescent elixir, undeniably reigns supreme at the heart of any Mongol gathering, you'd soon discover that the horde's liquid landscape stretched far beyond the fermented mare's milk. Oh no, your thirst, whether for warmth, invigoration, or something with a little more kick, was catered to with surprising ingenuity and a healthy dose of practical wisdom. Imagine, if you will, the steam rising from 100 different vessels, each holding a secret comfort or a potent cheer. Let's start with warmth, shall we? Because out on the vast, windswept steppes, warmth isn't just a luxury. It's a non-negotiable survival requirement. And for that, the Mongols embrace tea, but not quite as you might picture your dainty afternoon cuppa. No, this was the robust, fortifying, brick tea that traveled along the Silk Road, compressed into dense, portable blocks. Picture these dark, earthy bricks, looking rather like a very serious, very dehydrated chocolate bar, being chipped away. You'd watch as chunks were broken off, crushed, sometimes even ground into a coarse powder, before being thrown into large kettles bubbling over an open fire, or nestled directly onto hot stones within a pit. This wasn't just hot water and tea leaves, mind you. Oh, that would be far too simple, far too un-Mongol. No, the standard preparation involved a generous addition of milk, often mare's milk, but sometimes goat or yak, and, crucially, a pinch or often a good, hearty handful of salt. Yes, salt. It sounds, perhaps, a little bit like a culinary dare, doesn't it? Like someone accidentally dropped the shaker into your morning brew. But trust me, or rather, trust the wisdom of centuries of steppe dwellers. This salty, milky tea, known as sutitsai, was the ultimate rehydrator, the perfect counterpoint to a diet rich in meat and fat, and an instant warmth delivery system. The salt helped replenish electrolytes lost during strenuous activity, and the fat from the milk provided vital calories. It's like their version of a sports drink, a coffee, and a comforting soup all rolled into one. And if you were feeling particularly decadent, or perhaps just incredibly cold, a dollop of butter or even a piece of sheep's tail fat might find its way into your mug, melting into a shimmering, nourishing slick on the surface. It's not for the faint of heart, perhaps, but it certainly puts hairs on your chest. Or at least it warms the ones you already have. The pervasive use of brick tea is a mainstream historical fact, illustrating the deep connectivity of the Mongol Empire to the wider Eurasian trade networks. These compressed blocks were not just beverages. They were a form of currency, a staple of diplomatic exchange, and a testament to the Silk Road's enduring power. They were so practical for nomadic life, compact, durable, and easily portioned that they became an indispensable part of daily life, not just for feasting, but for every single day on the move. You'd see children sipping it, warriors sharing it, and elders contemplating the vastness of the steppe over a steaming bowl. And as for a quirky tidbit, well, historians still argue whether the addition of butter or fat to sutitsai was purely for caloric intake and warmth, or if there was a subtle, almost ritualistic aspect to the richness it imparted, connecting the drinker to the bounty of the herds. Certainly made it a more substantial drink, that's for sure. But what about when the mood called for something a little stronger than tea, even salty, buttery tea? When the celebrations escalated, or the chill of the night truly bit, the Mongols turned to distilled spirits. The most common and culturally significant among these was arki, often referred to as milk vodka or milk liquor. This wasn't some concoction brought back from conquered lands. This was an indigenous innovation, a testament to their resourcefulness. Arki was typically distilled from arag itself, or sometimes from Shimian arki, a spirit made from the whey left over after making cheese. Imagine the process. The fermented mare's milk, already a bit boozy, would be gently heated in large, simple stills. These could be quite rudimentary, often consisting of a large pot covered by a smaller, inverted pot or a bowl, with condensation trickling down into a collecting vessel. It's a beautifully simple, elegant piece of engineering. Really, the alcohol, having a lower boiling point than water, would evaporate first, condense on the cooler surface above, and then drip down as a much more potent spirit. The aroma, as the arki began to drip, would be sharp, almost medicinal, a stark contrast to the yeasty tang of arag. You'd feel a prickle in your nose, a hint of the fire that was to come. This wasn't a drink for casual sipping, at least not in large quantities. Arki was potent, often reaching strengths comparable to modern vodkas or whiskeys. It delivered a fierce warmth that spread through your veins, chasing away the cold and loosening tongues. It was reserved for special occasions, for toasts of profound significance, for welcoming honored guests, and for marking the apex of a feast. When the communal bowl of arki was passed, it was done with respect, often with a finger dipped and offered to the sky or the earth before drinking, a silent acknowledgement of the spirits and the land. Of course, as the Mongol Empire expanded, so too did their culinary horizons. While arki remained a beloved, homegrown spirit, contact with other cultures introduced new possibilities. From China, they would have encountered various forms of rice wine and other grain-based liquors. From Persia and the Middle East, grape wines might have made an appearance, though likely in smaller, more exclusive quantities, a true luxury for the Khans and their inner circle. These new acquisitions would have been curiosities, sometimes adopted, sometimes merely sampled, but they added layers to the Mongol feasting experience, showing the vastness of their reach. It's a bit like finding a fancy French wine at your local barbecue. Delightful, but you still grab a beer for most of the night. These diverse beverages played crucial roles in complementing the hearty, meat-centric Mongol cuisine. The salty tea cut through the richness of mutton and horse meat, aiding digestion and preventing that heavy, sluggish feeling. The potent arki, on the other hand, was not just a social lubricant. It was a powerful digestive aid after a massive meal, and a welcome internal furnace against the biting steppe winds. The contrast between the warming, everyday tea and the celebratory, fiery spirits perfectly mirrored the rhythms of nomadic life. Days of steady endurance punctuated by bursts of joyous, uninhibited celebration. So, As the feast reached its crescendo, with music filling the air and stories echoing around the kurgal, you wouldn't just be reaching for another bowl of arag. No, you'd have choices. Perhaps a steaming, salty cup of sutitsai to ground you, to warm you from the inside out as the night grew colder. Or, if the mood was right, if a particularly grand toast was being made, you might find a small wooden bowl of clear, fiery arki pressed into your hands. Its sharp scent a prelude to the potent warmth that would soon spread through your very core. It was all part of the grand tapestry of Mongol hospitality, ensuring that every guest, every warrior, every family member, was not just fed, but utterly sustained, body and soul, in the heart of the horde. As the tantalizing aromas of korhog and budog begin to swirl through the vast encampment, and the rhythmic thud of the gurs felt door flap signals the arrival of more guests, you realize that simply walking into a Mongol feast isn't like strolling into your buddy's backyard barbecue. Oh no, my friend. This is where the ancient dance of hierarchy and respect truly begins. A silent ballet of power and position that defines every single gathering. Forget finding the comfiest couch. Here, every cushion, every patch of ground, tells a story about who you are and where you stand in the grand scheme of the Mongol horde. You approach the entrance of the largest gur, perhaps the Khan's own portable palace, a structure far grander than any you've seen so far, its white felt gleaming under the afternoon sun. The air hums with anticipation, a low murmur of voices punctuated by the occasional whinny of a horse or the clatter of a cooking pot. Before you even step inside, you pause because you've learned that simply crossing the threshold without thought is a major faux pas. In fact, it's not just rude. It's considered deeply disrespectful, almost like a deliberate challenge to the host. It's akin to walking into a fancy restaurant and immediately putting your feet on the table. You just don't do it. There's a quiet reverence for the threshold, almost as if it's a protective barrier, a line between the outer world and the inner sanctuary of the family or leader. You watch others carefully step over it, never on it, a small but significant detail that speaks volumes about the meticulous nature of Mongol etiquette. Once inside, the first thing that strikes you is the sheer scale of the gathering. Yet within that scale, an immediate order presents itself. The circular space of the gur, usually a symbol of unity and the cosmos, here becomes a meticulously organized map of social standing. Your eyes drift immediately to the very back, the northernmost part of the gur, known as the tor or kana. This is the place of honor, the sacred space, and almost certainly where the Khan himself, or the highest-ranking noble, will be seated. Imagine the head of the table, but instead of a rectangular monstrosity, it's the most revered point of a perfect circle. This position, facing south towards the entrance, allows the Khan to survey all who enter and all who are present, a subtle yet powerful display of his authority and oversight. It's like being the conductor of an orchestra, able to see every musician, every note. Now, where do you fit into this intricate puzzle? Well, unless you're a direct descendant of Genghis Khan, a formidable general, or a particularly revered shaman, you'll be finding your spot somewhere further from that hallowed northern wall. The closer you are to the tor, the higher your rank, the greater your prestige. Immediately to the Khan's right, and then to his left, you'd find his closest family members, his most trusted generals, and the most influential tribal leaders. The right side, in many nomadic cultures, was often considered slightly more auspicious or honorable, perhaps reserved for elders or those of spiritual significance, while the left might hold military commanders or younger, ambitious leaders. Historians still argue whether this right-left distinction was always strictly adhered to or if it varied based on the specific context of the feast or the particular individuals present. It's not as simple as a simple left is wrong, right is right sort of deal. It's more nuanced, like trying to figure out which side of the couch your cat prefers on any given Tuesday. As you move further away from the northern tor, towards the sides and then the southern entrance, the hierarchy descends. Warriors of lesser rank, trusted advisors, and then the more common folk or those from allied, but less dominant, tribes would fill the space. There's a tangible sense of order, a quiet understanding that everyone knows their place, much like a well-drilled military formation, but for feasting. You won't see anyone casually strolling to an empty spot near the Khan if they haven't earned it. That would be like trying to sit in the VIP box at a concert when your ticket is for the nosebleeds, a quick way to get escorted out, or at least earn some very chilly stares. The seating wasn't just about showing respect. It was also about maintaining order and preventing disputes. In a society built on honor and martial prowess, any perceived slight could lead to significant friction. By having a clear, established system, everyone knew what was expected. It streamlined the serving process too. The finest cuts of meat, the first pours of arag, would always go to the Khan and those immediately around him, then systematically move down the ranks. You wouldn't reach for your cup until your superior had been served. It's a bit like waiting for the host to start eating at a formal dinner, but with far higher stakes if you get it wrong. Even the women, while often seated separately or at the edges of the main gathering depending on the specific feast and their status, had their own internal hierarchy. The Khan's primary wife, the Khatun, would hold a place of immense respect, perhaps near her husband but slightly to his side, or at a prominent position among the women. Younger wives, daughters, and other female relatives would be arranged accordingly. It wasn't always strict segregation. Sometimes, particularly at smaller, more intimate family gatherings, there was more intermingling, but the overarching principle of respect for elders and those of higher standing remained. The entire process of finding your seat and settling in is a quiet ritual. You don't rush. You don't make loud noises. You observe. You wait to be gestured to a spot, or you discreetly find your appropriate place based on your known standing. Once seated, usually on felt mats or low cushions, you maintain a respectful posture. Slouching or sprawling would be considered rude, a sign of disrespect to those of higher rank and to the feast itself. It's a bit like attending a very important meeting where everyone is subtly assessing your professionalism. Except here, your professionalism is measured by your mastery of ancient social graces. This meticulous attention to seating and etiquette wasn't merely for show. It was a fundamental pillar of Mongol social cohesion. It reinforced the power structure, reminded everyone of their duties and allegiances, and minimized potential conflicts by clearly defining who held authority. Every feast, therefore, became a living tableau of the horde's intricate social fabric, a silent reaffirmation of the bonds that held this vast, mobile empire together. It was a powerful tool for forging unity, turning a chaotic gathering into a disciplined, respectful assembly. And let's be honest, it also made sure that the guy who always tries to sneak the biggest piece of meat got his rightful turn, which in any society is a win. So, as you finally settle onto your assigned spot, feeling the rough texture of the felt beneath you, you become part of this ancient, living tradition. You're not just attending a meal, you're participating in a carefully choreographed ceremony, a testament to the Mongols' genius not just in conquest, but in creating and maintaining a stable, ordered society, even while constantly on the move. It's a quiet power, this ability to organize 1,000 people into a perfectly respectful dining experience, without a single seating chart app. Truly impressive. As the last sips of arag are savored and the warmth of the communal meal settles deep within your belly, a different kind of energy begins to stir across the sprawling Kurgal. The air, once thick with the aroma of roasted meats and the murmur of conversation, now hums with anticipation. You've dined, you've drunk, and now it's time for the show. This isn't just about filling your stomach. It's about feeding the soul of the horde, about reinforcing bonds through shared joy and, sometimes, a little friendly competition. Think of it as the ultimate ancient variety show, but with significantly more muscle and less sparkly confetti. First, the music drifts in, soft at first, then growing more resonant. You might hear the soulful, almost haunting strains of the Morin Kur, the horsehead fiddle. Its two strings, traditionally made of horsehair, produce a sound that feels as vast and open as the steppe itself. It can be mournful, telling tales of separation and longing, or it can be vibrant, mimicking the thundering hooves of 1,000 horses. As the musician draws the bow across the strings, you can almost feel the wind whipping through your hair, even inside the cozy warmth of a jar. And then there's the throat singing. Oh, the throat singing. It's like a secret language where one person produces multiple notes simultaneously. A low drone, a high whistle, all from the same throat. It's an auditory illusion, a vocal magic trick that makes you wonder if they've got a hidden bird tucked away somewhere in their windpipe. It's truly mesmerizing, a sound that seems to vibrate not just in your ears, but deep within your very bones. It's the kind of music that makes you want to lie back, close your eyes, and just let the vibrations carry you away, perhaps to a dream where even the steppe ponies are tapping their hooves in time. But the Mongols weren't just about contemplative melodies. Oh no, the energy quickly escalates as the three manly sports of Naadam begin to take center stage. These aren't just games. They are a celebration of strength, skill, and the very essence of nomadic life. You're about to witness displays of might that would make even the most seasoned modern athlete nod in respect. First up, and arguably the most captivating, is Bok or Mongol wrestling. Imagine two powerful figures, clad in surprisingly minimal attire. A small, open-chested vest called a zodog that shows off their impressive musculature, and tight shorts known as shudag. No weight classes, no lengthy rounds, just raw power and strategy. The goal is simple. Make your opponent touch the ground with any part of their body other than their feet or hands. You watch as they circle each other, hands extended, looking for an opening. The tension is palpable. The crowd, which just moments ago was quietly listening to a Morin Kur, now erupts with shouts and cheers, urging on their favorites. There's a distinct lack of fanfare, no dramatic walkout music, just the raw power of two men testing their limits. It's less about brute force, though there's plenty of that, and more about leverage, balance, and a surprising amount of agility for men of their stature. When a wrestler finally manages to throw his opponent, he performs an elegant, almost avian eagle dance, stretching his arms out like wings, leaping and circling, a gesture of respect and triumph. It's a truly unique display, and you realize these aren't just athletes. They're living embodiments of the Mongol spirit. This practice, of course, isn't just for show. It's a direct reflection of the physical prowess required for survival and conquest on the steppe. It's a mainstream historical fact that these wrestling contests were, and still are, central to Mongol identity and physical training. Next, your gaze shifts to the archery competition. Here, precision and focus are paramount. Mongol bows, often composite bows made from horn, wood, and sinew, are incredibly powerful. You watch as archers, some on foot, some on horseback, send arrows whistling towards distant targets. The targets aren't your typical bullseyes. They're often small, cylindrical leather mounds arranged on the ground, requiring a challenging downward trajectory. The skill involved is breathtaking. Imagine trying to hit a small tin can from 100 yards, but doing it while your horse is galloping at full tilt across uneven terrain. It's a testament to years, perhaps even a lifetime of practice. There's a quiet intensity here, a stark contrast to the boisterous wrestling. As each archer concentrates, draws, and releases, the thwack of the arrow hitting its mark met with appreciative murmurs from the onlookers. And then there's the horse racing. This isn't your typical thoroughbred track event. Oh no, these races are long, sometimes covering dozens of miles across the open steppe. And the jockeys? They're often children, sometimes as young as 5 or 6, riding bareback, their small frames clinging to the powerful horses. It's a quirky tidbit that these tiny jockeys are chosen not just for their light weight, but for their innate connection with the horses, a bond forged from infancy. You see them, a blur of motion and dust, their faces set with fierce determination, their small hands gripping the horse's manes. The sheer endurance of both horse and rider is astounding. There are no fancy grandstands, no betting parlors, at least, not in the way you might imagine them. Just the thunder of hooves, the shouts of encouragement, and the incredible spectacle of these magnificent animals and their fearless young riders. It's a powerful reminder that for the Mongols, a horse wasn't just a mode of transport. It was a partner, a weapon, and an extension of their very being. You might even find yourself wondering if, back in your own time, your car would ever listen to you as well as these horses listened to their pint-sized pilots. Probably not. But the entertainment isn't solely physical. As dusk settles and the fires crackle brighter, the focus shifts. Now it's time for the bards and storytellers. Imagine sitting around a roaring fire, the glow illuminating the rapt faces of the horde, as a master storyteller begins to weave a tale. These aren't just bedtime stories. They are the living history of the Mongol people. Epic poems, sometimes hundreds of verses long, recount the heroic deeds of legendary warriors, the wisdom of ancient Khans, and the origins of their people. You might hear excerpts from the secret history of the Mongols, or tales of Gesser and Jangar, heroes whose exploits rival any mythical figure from other cultures. The storyteller, often accompanying themselves on a morin-kur or a drum, uses their voice like an instrument, shifting tones, pausing for dramatic effect, bringing characters to life with a mere inflection. These aren't just passive listeners. The audience participates, sometimes murmuring responses, sometimes joining in on a refrain. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of these feasting games and storytelling sessions was genuine merriment or a highly effective, disguised form of military readiness training and cultural indoctrination. But as you sit there, captivated by the rhythm of the words and the flicker of the firelight, you're just happy to be part of something so ancient and profound. It's like the world's original podcast, but with better acoustics and absolutely no ads trying to sell you something you don't need. Unless, of course, the story is subtly trying to sell you on the virtues of absolute loyalty to the Great Khan. Which, let's be honest, it probably is. So, as the night deepens and the stars begin to emerge, you realize that these feasts are far more than just meals. They are vibrant, multi-sensory experiences, carefully orchestrated spectacles that reinforce identity, honor tradition, and prepare the horde for whatever challenges lie ahead. The merriment, the music, and the might displayed here are the very sinews of their society, binding them together in a way that mere sustenance never could. You drift off, the echoes of throats singing and the imagined thunder of hooves still resonating in your mind. So, you've seen the roaring fires, the vast quantities of meat being prepared, the bubbling stews, and the rivers of arag flowing. But why go to all this monumental effort? Why mobilize an entire horde, from the lowliest herder to the mightiest Khan, to stage such an elaborate culinary spectacle? You see, a Mongol feast was never just about eating. Oh no, that would be far too simple for such a complex, nomadic society. These grand gatherings, these magnificent meals, were the very sinews of the Mongol Empire, serving a multitude of profound and practical purposes, from the gravest political maneuverings to the most joyous, belly-aching celebrations. Imagine, for a moment, the vast Kurgal spread out before you, the air thick with the scent of roasted meat and the murmur of thousands of voices. This wasn't just a dinner party. It was a stage. One of the most critical functions of these massive feasts was as a crucible for political negotiations and alliances. You'd find yourself amidst the most powerful figures of the horde, khans, generals, tribal leaders, all gathered, perhaps under a specially erected pavilion or within a grand yurt. The atmosphere would be thick with unspoken tension, the clinking of bowls and the crackle of the central fire the only sounds breaking the hushed discussions. Here, over shared platters of budog and endless cups of arag, loyalty was sworn, treaties were sealed, and the fate of vast territories was decided. Think of it like the ultimate corporate retreat, but instead of team-building exercises, you're deciding who gets to rule half the known world, and instead of lukewarm coffee, you've got potent fermented mare's milk. It's here, at these feasts, that critical decisions like the election of a new great Khan would take place, during a Kurultai, a grand council. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Kurultai was the primary method for selecting a new leader, and it was invariably accompanied by lavish feasting and celebrations that could last for days, even weeks. Imagine the pressure. Every gesture, every toast, every shared piece of meat carried weight. You'd watch as powerful men, eyes narrowed, assessed each other across the steaming platters, their political maneuvering as intricate as the preparation of a whole roasted sheep. Because nothing says, "I trust you completely," like sharing a giant bowl of fermented mare's milk after a day of intense political maneuvering. Right? Beyond the high-stakes politics, these feasts also served as vital platforms for displaying wealth and power. When you saw a feast of this magnitude, with its endless supply of rare meats, fine textiles, and gleaming golden vessels, perhaps even spoils from recently conquered lands, it was an undeniable declaration of the host's immense resources and influence. It was a visual, olfactory, and gustatory demonstration of might. "Look at all this meat, peasant!" the feast seemed to bellow. "Yes, it's all for us. You get to bask in our glory and maybe catch a stray bone if you're lucky." This wasn't just about feeding the multitude. It was about impressing them, reminding them of the hierarchy, and solidifying the host's position at the apex of the social pyramid. But let's not make it sound too serious. Not every feast was a grim political summit. Many were joyous seasonal celebrations and communal gatherings. The most significant of these was Tsagan Sar, the Lunar New Year, which marked the end of winter and the promise of new life. You'd see the horde don their finest clothes, exchange gifts, and partake in special foods meant to bring good fortune for the coming year. The air would vibrate not with political tension, but with laughter, the shouts of children, and the joyous strains of music. Other celebrations included successful hunts, the births of children, and, of course, weddings. These were moments of release, of shared happiness, where the hardships of nomadic life were momentarily forgotten in a whirlwind of food, drink, and merriment. And you thought your family's holiday dinner was stressful. Try coordinating a feast for 10,000 people who've just spent a year chasing yaks across the steppes. These celebrations were critical for reinforcing social cohesion and fostering brotherhood within the horde. In a society constantly on the move, with disparate tribes and clans brought together under a single banner, shared meals were powerful rituals for forging unity and loyalty. When you break bread, or more accurately, tear off a piece of roasted gazelle with someone, a bond is formed. It's a primal act of trust and community. You'd sit elbow to elbow with warriors, craftsmen, and elders, all partaking from the same bounty, all sharing in the same experience. This communal act transcended individual differences, reminding everyone that they were part of something much larger than themselves. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of these grand feasts was truly communal bonding or more a demonstration of hierarchical power and control, but it's clear both elements were always at play. Beyond the formal political gatherings and seasonal festivities, feasts also served as informal military planning sessions and victory celebrations. Before a major campaign, a feast might be held to boost morale, to lay out strategy, and to ensure every warrior was well-fed and ready for the challenges ahead. After a triumphant return, these feasts would transform into exuberant victory parties, where the spoils of war might be displayed, heroes honored, and the collective might of the horde celebrated. You can almost hear the triumphant roars, the clanking of weapons, and the boisterous toasts to future conquests. I bet their war council meetings were way more productive than ours. So we conquer Persia, then what? More core hog. And here's a quirky or fringe tidbit. Sometimes, these feasts were so prolonged and so focused on the consumption of arag and other potent spirits that important decisions or even military campaigns would be postponed for days, even weeks, until the leaders had sufficiently recovered. Imagine the historical ripple effect if a major invasion was delayed because the generals were too hungover to ride. It adds a certain human, slightly comical element to the otherwise formidable image of the Mongol war machine. So, from solemn oaths sworn over steaming platters to boisterous celebrations under the vast steppe sky, from the careful display of power to the raw forging of brotherhood, the Mongol feast was a multi-layered phenomenon. It was sustenance for the body, yes, but even more so, it was sustenance for the very fabric of the empire, weaving together its disparate threads into a formidable, unified whole. Every bite, every sip, every shared laugh or tense silence was a part of the grand tapestry of Mongol power and survival. So far, we've painted a picture of grand gatherings, of sprawling camps settling down for days of merriment and magnificent meals. But now, let's pull back the curtain on a truly mind-boggling aspect of Mongol life. How on earth did they maintain any semblance of their feasting traditions while galloping across continents, conquering empires, and generally being the most formidable fighting force the world had ever seen? It's one thing to host a backyard barbecue. It's quite another to cater a multi-course banquet for tens of thousands of people while simultaneously orchestrating a military campaign that spans thousands of miles and involves besieging heavily fortified cities. You'd think the simple act of putting food in your mouth would become a secondary, almost forgotten concern. Imagine, if you will, being part of this relentless tide. One day you're in the dusty plains of Central Asia, the next you're crossing frozen rivers in Eastern Europe, and then you're slogging through the mud of a besieged city in Persia. Your primary objective is victory, survival, and staying ahead of the enemy. Yet, the Mongols, with their deep-seated cultural reverence for shared meals, found ways to keep the fires of their feasts burning, even if they were just embers compared to the roaring infernos of peacetime celebrations. This wasn't just about sustenance. It was about maintaining morale, reinforcing unity, and perhaps most importantly, preserving their very identity as a nomadic people, even as they became the rulers of a vast sedentary world. The logistical challenge was, frankly, monstrous. Most armies throughout history have relied on cumbersome supply lines, stretching back to depots and granaries. The Mongols, however, famously didn't. Or, more accurately, they were their own supply line. You weren't just a soldier, you were also a mobile pantry, a walking larder, and occasionally a living, breathing, galloping protein shake. This brings us to the first, and perhaps most crucial, innovation, the live larder. As you trudge along, you'd be surrounded not just by fellow warriors, but by vast herds of livestock, sheep, goats, and, of course, horses. These animals weren't just for riding or pulling carts. They were walking, bleeding, future dinners. Imagine the sheer scale of it. Thousands upon thousands of animals moving with the horde, a living, breathing food source that replenished itself, albeit slowly. It's like trying to cater a multi-city music tour by bringing your entire farm with you. The dust, the noise, the sheer number of hooves. It's a wonder anyone got any sleep. Beyond the ambulatory buffet, the Mongols mastered the art of food preservation, turning it into a mobile, high-energy fuel source. We've talked about borts, that incredibly dense, dried meat that could sustain a warrior for days. On campaign, borts was less a delicacy and more a lifeline. You'd carry your personal supply, a compact brick of protein that could be gnawed on directly or rehydrated in hot water to make a thin, nourishing broth. Think of it as the ultimate original energy bar, but instead of a chewy granola mix, it's pure, concentrated animal protein. And unlike your typical modern energy bar, which probably tastes like cardboard and regret, borts was the taste of survival, of home, of the steppe itself. Along with borts, you'd find arrowel, dried curds, offering another lightweight, durable source of protein and calcium. These weren't just snacks. They were the backbone of the Mongol campaign diet, enabling their famed speed and endurance by minimizing the need to stop and forage extensively. Now, for the cooking itself. When you're on the move, you can't exactly set up a five-star kitchen. The Mongols adapted their traditional cooking methods for maximum efficiency and portability. The korhog, which we discussed as a grand feast dish, could be simplified for campaign use. Instead of digging a massive pit, smaller, more temporary arrangements would be made. Hot stones were still the key, but perhaps the vessel would be a simple pot, or even just the carcass of an animal itself for the budog method. You'd witness the swift, almost surgical, precision with which an animal would be butchered, its meat quickly prepared and cooked over readily available fuel, often dried dung, which, surprisingly, burns quite hot and with minimal smoke, a handy feature when you don't want to alert the enemy to your dinner plans. The speed of their campaigns was legendary, a mainstream historical fact that bewildered their sedentary opponents. This speed was intrinsically linked to their self-sufficiency. They didn't wait for supply wagons. They were the supply wagons. This meant that while grand, multi-day feasts were rare during active conquest, smaller, more frequent, and highly efficient communal meals were essential. After a long day's ride, or even after a skirmish, the commanders would ensure that food was prepared. It might be a simple stew, a quick roast, or even just rehydrated borts, but the act of sharing it, of sitting together, however briefly, reaffirmed the bonds of the horde. Water, the often unsung hero of any campaign, presented its own colossal challenge. You can't feast without water, not just for drinking, but for cooking, for the animals. The Mongol scouts were masters at finding water sources, predicting their locations, and planning routes accordingly. Imagine the logistics of watering tens of thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of animals in unfamiliar territory. It was a constant, pressing concern, far more critical than finding the perfect spice blend for your korhog. And what about the purpose of these campaign feasts? They weren't just about filling bellies. They were vital for morale. After a grueling march, a hard-won battle, or even a strategic retreat, a shared meal, however simple, was a psychological anchor. It reminded everyone that they were part of a cohesive unit, a family, bound by shared hardship and shared success. It was a moment of respite, a chance to relax, exchange stories, and reinforce loyalty to their commanders and to the great Khan himself. You'd hear the quiet murmur of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter, perhaps even a short song, before the silence of the night settled once more. As the Mongols pushed further into new lands, their feasting traditions began to adapt, not just out of necessity but out of opportunity. While they famously disdained agricultural products initially, preferring their traditional meat and dairy diet, they were also pragmatists. When besieging a city, they'd often use the surrounding farmlands for provisions. After a conquest, the spoils of war weren't just gold and silver. They were also the local foodstuffs. This is where things get a bit quirky. There are accounts of Mongols, accustomed to their simple, hearty fare, encountering new ingredients and culinary methods. While not immediately adopting them, they would certainly utilize them to supplement their existing diet. Imagine a Mongol warrior, used to borts and mare's milk, suddenly encountering rice, spices, or even wine for the first time. It might not have been love at first bite, but it was certainly a new experience. This subtle, gradual incorporation of new resources into their campaign diet, driven by practicality, foreshadows the broader culinary exchange that would come later. Historians still argue whether the frequency of grand feasts truly diminished during active campaigns or if their nature simply transformed entirely. It's unlikely that the multi-day, multi-dish extravaganzas of peacetime were common occurrences. Instead, it's more probable that the concept of feast became more fluid, encompassing any communal meal that served to unite and strengthen the horde. Perhaps a successful raid, a significant victory, or a strategic gathering of commanders would warrant a more elaborate, albeit still mobile and efficient, meal. It was less about the quantity of dishes and more about the quality of the shared experience. The strict discipline and hierarchical structure of the Mongol army also played a crucial role in managing food distribution on campaign. Every Tumen, 10,000 men, and Mingan, 1,000 men, was a largely self-sufficient unit, responsible for its own provisions. This decentralized approach meant that rather than one massive, vulnerable supply chain, there were many smaller, agile ones. Commanders ensured that rations were distributed fairly, minimizing waste and preventing disputes. It was a system built on efficiency and mutual responsibility. Imagine trying to get 10,000 people to agree on pizza toppings, let alone organize their entire food supply for a cross-continental invasion. Truly was a marvel of organization. Ultimately, maintaining feasting traditions on campaign was a testament to the Mongols' incredible adaptability and their deep-seated cultural values. It wasn't just about eating, it was about reaffirming who they were, even as they reshaped the world. The shared meal, however simple, was a powerful ritual that forged brotherhood and loyalty, turning a disparate collection of warriors into a cohesive, unstoppable force. It was the taste of home, of unity, and of impending victory, even amidst the dust and thunder of conquest. You've witnessed the primal, robust foundation of a Mongol feast. The hunt, the basic meats, the fiery cooking pits, and the ever-present arag. It's a diet forged on the steppes, efficient and powerful, perfectly suited for a people on the move. But now, as the Mongol horde expands beyond the familiar horizons of grass and sky, you begin to see a transformation, a culinary metamorphosis so profound it would make even the most jaded food critic gasp. This isn't just about adding a side dish. It's about the very DNA of their feasting evolving, much like a nomadic band suddenly discovering a Michelin-starred restaurant at the end of their migration route. Imagine, if you will, the sheer astonishment. For centuries, your palate has known the comforting, strong flavors of mutton fat, horse meat, and fermented mare's milk. Then, suddenly, your warriors are returning from campaigns, not just with plunder and captives, but with oranges. Bright, zesty, sun-kissed oranges from the south. Or perhaps the delicate, fragrant grains of rice from China, or the complex, aromatic spices of Persia and India. It's like someone just introduced you to sushi after a lifetime of only ever eating steak. You'd be confused, maybe a little suspicious, but undeniably intrigued. The spoils of war weren't just gold and silk. They were also the very ingredients that would redefine the Mongol feasting table. The contact with new cultures, facilitated by conquest, was the ultimate culinary school. As the Mongol armies swept across vast continents, from the sophisticated empires of China to the rich, diverse lands of Central Asia, Persia, and even into Eastern Europe, they didn't just conquer territories. They absorbed traditions. Think of it like a massive cultural sponge, soaking up every delicious drop of culinary wisdom it encountered. You'd observe Mongol generals, initially perhaps wary, eventually developing a taste for the exotic, instructing their logistics teams to bring back not just more horses, but more saffron, more cloves, more everything. The most fundamental shift, perhaps, was the introduction and widespread adoption of grains. For a people whose diet was overwhelmingly meat and dairy, the concept of cultivation on a grand scale was somewhat alien. But in China, you'd find vast rice paddies, and in Persia, fields of wheat. Suddenly, the Mongol feasting table, once dominated by roasted carcasses, began to feature fluffy pilafs, delicate noodles, and crusty breads. You might even see a warrior, initially perplexed by a bowl of steaming rice, eventually coming to appreciate its subtle texture and ability to soak up the rich juices of their traditional meats. It's not hard to imagine the first time a Mongol tried a perfectly baked piece of naan bread. It must have been a revelation, like discovering toast after a lifetime of only ever eating raw oats. Then there were the spices. Oh, the spices! From the bustling markets of Samarkand to the fragrant caravans winding along the Silk Road, the Mongols gained access to a kaleidoscope of aromas and flavors previously unknown. Cinnamon, cloves, black pepper, nutmeg, saffron, these weren't just exotic luxuries. They were transformative agents. They turned simple boiled meats into complex, aromatic stews. They elevated plain broths into fragrant elixirs. You'd witness chefs, perhaps captured from a Persian court or a Chinese imperial kitchen, demonstrating how a pinch of this or a dash of that could utterly change a dish, much to the wonder of their Mongol overlords. It was a sensory explosion, turning a meal from mere sustenance into an art form. Beyond the raw ingredients, the Mongols also encountered new cooking techniques. Imagine the open-pit roasting and stone-cooking methods of the steppes meeting the sophisticated ovens of Persia, capable of baking delicate pastries and intricate breads. Or the stir-frying techniques of China, which could quickly transform vegetables and slivers of meat into vibrant, crisp dishes. You'd see the Mongol campfires supplemented by more permanent, elaborate kitchens in conquered cities, where skilled artisans demonstrated their craft. This wasn't just about bigger feasts, it was about more diverse feasts. A warrior might still crave a hunky piece of roasted horse, but now he could also enjoy a fragrant lamb korma or a crispy duck. The sheer variety of fruits and vegetables that entered the Mongol diet was also astonishing. Before, it was mostly wild onions and whatever hardy roots could be foraged. Now, suddenly, there were pomegranates, melons, grapes, peaches, apricots, and a myriad of leafy greens. These weren't just for decoration. They added vital vitamins and new textures. You can picture the initial confusion, perhaps a Mongol warrior wondering if a cucumber was some kind of strange, elongated, green sausage, before realizing its refreshing crunch. It must have been a revelation for their digestive systems, too, after a lifetime of primarily meat and dairy. And let's not forget the beverages. While arag remained the soul of the Mongol feast, conquest brought forth a wider array of options. From the vineyards of Central Asia and Persia came various wines, offering a different kind of celebratory spirit. From China, you'd find more refined teas, some with delicate floral notes, others robust and earthy. And then there were the distilled spirits, more potent than anything they had encountered before, offering a different kind of warmth during cold nights. Historians still argue whether the Mongols actively sought out these new culinary traditions, or if it was a more organic, passive absorption due to necessity and exposure, but the outcome was undeniable. Their drinking habits diversified significantly. One mainstream historical fact that perfectly illustrates this culinary cross-pollination is the establishment of the Yuan dynasty in China by Kublai Khan. The imperial court in Dadu, modern-day Beijing, became a melting pot of culinary traditions. Here, Mongol preferences for meat and dairy blended seamlessly with Chinese techniques and ingredients, creating a unique imperial cuisine. You'd find dishes with Mongol names prepared using Chinese methods, and Chinese dishes infused with Central Asian spices. It was the original fusion cuisine, long before it had a trendy name or a celebrity chef attached to it. A quirky or fringe tidbit that highlights this blending is the theory that certain noodle dishes, which became incredibly popular in China, might have seen a resurgence or new forms of preparation influenced by the Mongols' practical, on-the-go cooking style, even if noodles themselves predated them. Or consider the introduction of new methods for making fermented milk products, beyond arag, adopting techniques from settled communities that led to a broader range of cheeses and yogurts. It's like your favorite band suddenly collaborating with a classical orchestra, familiar elements, but a whole new sound. The impact of these culinary rewards extended beyond just taste. It was about prestige, about demonstrating the vastness of the Mongol Empire. A feast laden with exotic spices, rare fruits, and dishes prepared by master chefs from conquered lands was a powerful statement of wealth and might. You'd see the Khan's table groaning under the weight of dishes from a dozen different cultures, each bite a testament to the reach of his empire. It wasn't just about filling your belly. It was about asserting dominance through deliciousness. Imagine the bragging rights. "Oh, this little appetizer? It's from a kingdom we conquered last week. Their chef is divine." You might even witness the subtle shift in the Mongols themselves. While their core identity remained nomadic, their palates broadened. Their understanding of the world deepened through the universal language of food. They began to appreciate the nuances of different cuisines, perhaps even developing preferences for certain regional dishes. It's a testament to the adaptability of the Mongol people that they didn't just impose their will on conquered lands, but also allowed themselves to be enriched by them, especially when it came to something as fundamental and enjoyable as food. So, the next time you think of Mongol feasts, don't just picture roasted sheep and arag. Picture a table groaning with fragrant pilafs, vibrant stir-fries, delicate pastries, and a rainbow of fruits, all alongside the familiar meats. It was a feast that mirrored the empire itself. Vast, diverse, and constantly expanding, deliciously absorbing the best of every culture it encountered. The conquest wasn't just military. It was a culinary revolution, turning the simple shepherd's meal into an imperial banquet fit for the rulers of the known world. You've tasted the rich meats, sipped the potent arag, and witnessed the spectacle of the feast. But as the last morsel of quorhog vanishes and the final drops of mare's milk are drained, you begin to grasp something far deeper than mere satiation. These grand gatherings, these roaring, vibrant feasts, weren't just about feeding an army or celebrating a victory. Oh no, my friend, they were powerful, almost magical rituals for forging something truly unbreakable. Unity and loyalty within the sprawling, diverse Mongol horde. Imagine, if you will, the sheer logistics of holding together a nomadic empire that stretched across continents. It wasn't just about military might, it was about hearts and minds. And what better way to bind hearts than over a shared meal, especially when that meal is the culmination of collective effort and shared risk. You're sitting there, perhaps shoulder to shoulder with a warrior whose family hails from a completely different steppe tribe, or even a newly integrated craftsman from a conquered city. The flickering firelight dances across faces, some weather-beaten and grim, others young and eager. You've all just eaten from the same communal platter, perhaps even passed the same cup of arag. In that moment, the distinctions of origin, the old tribal rivalries, they begin to blur. They melt away like snow under the spring sun, replaced by a nascent, powerful sense of us. Think of it like this: modern team-building exercises often involve trust falls or escape rooms, right? The Mongols had eat a gazelle together until you can barely move, then wrestle each other. Far more effective, if you ask me, and definitely tastier than lukewarm coffee and stale pastries. There's a primal satisfaction in sharing bounty, especially after periods of scarcity or intense campaigning. That full belly, that contented sigh, it's all subconsciously linked to the group that provided it. You feel safe, provided for, part of something. This isn't just sustenance. It's a profound psychological anchor. The ritualistic aspect of these feasts was paramount. It wasn't just haphazard eating. We've already touched on the strict seating arrangements, but consider the act of drinking together. The passing of the cup, often from the highest-ranking individual down, or in a specific order, wasn't merely a polite gesture. It was an acknowledgement of shared fate, a silent oath. When a new general or a tribal leader was brought into the fold, their acceptance was often sealed with a communal drink, a solemn, yet joyous, pledge of allegiance. You're not just clinking glasses, you're clinking destinies. A mainstream historical fact that highlights this perfectly is the practice of anda, or blood brotherhood. While not always performed at a massive feast, the spirit of it permeated these gatherings. The anda ritual, often involving the mixing and drinking of a small amount of blood, though some accounts suggest it was more symbolic, like sharing a special meal or drink from the same vessel, created an unbreakable bond, considered even stronger than familial ties in some contexts. At the grand feasts, the atmosphere fostered by shared food and drink mimicked this profound connection, extending it to the entire horde. When you looked around, you weren't just seeing soldiers. You were seeing brothers and sisters in arms, bound by the taste of the same meat and the warmth of the same fire. The leaders, especially the great khans, understood this power implicitly. They didn't just host feasts. They orchestrated them as tools of governance and consolidation. A Kurultai, the great assembly where major decisions were made, from electing a new khan to planning vast military campaigns, always began and ended with elaborate feasting. This wasn't just a perk for attending. It was integral to the process. Imagine the scene. Grand pronouncements made, alliances forged, and new laws decreed, all while the smell of roasting meat permeates the air and the sound of shared revelry echoes across the steppe. The sensory experience cemented the political decisions. When you pledged fealty to the great Khan, you did so with the taste of his generosity still on your tongue, the memory of his hospitality fresh in your mind. This created a powerful sense of obligation and gratitude, far more effective than any written contract. And it wasn't just about the top brass. The distribution of choice cuts of meat, or especially potent batches of arag, often served as a visible display of favor and status. You might see a particularly brave warrior or a skilled craftsman singled out for a special portion. This act of public recognition, fueled by the bounty of the feast, reinforced the meritocratic ideals that Genghis Khan himself championed. Loyalty wasn't just expected. It was cultivated, rewarded, and celebrated. It was a visible, tangible demonstration that your contributions were seen and valued. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some historical accounts suggest that during these feasts, particularly when important negotiations were underway, a specific etiquette regarding the consumption of arag evolved. It was considered highly impolite, almost an insult, to refuse a drink offered by your host or by a superior. This wasn't just about social grace. It was about demonstrating trust and willingness to be part of the collective. Picture someone trying to politely decline the 5th cup of fermented mare's milk while everyone else is enthusiastically toasting. It would have been quite the social faux pas, perhaps even seen as a sign of mistrust or disloyalty. Oh, you're not drinking? Is our arag not good enough for your highness? Or are you perhaps plotting something that requires a clear head? You can almost hear the gentle, sarcastic murmurs. The diversity of the horde itself made these feasts even more crucial. Mongols, Tatars, Caryats, Naimans, Uyghurs, even some Chinese engineers and Persian merchants, all brought together under one banner. Old animosities ran deep, tribal loyalties were fierce. But at the feast, everyone was sharing from the same pot, literally and figuratively. The shared laughter, the competitive wrestling matches, after you've had a few too many bowls of arag, those wrestling matches probably got even more entertaining, if less coordinated. The captivating storytelling that recounted the exploits of shared heroes. All these elements wove a new tapestry of identity. You were no longer just a warrior from the Angjarat tribe. You were a warrior of the Great Khan, part of the Mongol horde. Historians still argue whether the elaborate feasting rituals were primarily organic expressions of nomadic culture or meticulously engineered tools of political control. Was it a natural outgrowth of their way of life, or a calculated strategy by shrewd leaders to maintain an unprecedented empire? Perhaps it was a beautiful, powerful blend of both. Regardless, the effect was undeniable. These shared meals provided a crucial, unifying experience that transcended language barriers and cultural differences. They were a common denominator, a shared language of belonging. So, as you lean back, feeling the warmth of the fire on your face and the pleasant heaviness of a full stomach, you realize the true genius of Mongol feasting. It wasn't just about the food or the drink or the entertainment. It was about forging bonds, about transforming a disparate collection of tribes and peoples into a cohesive, loyal force. It was about creating a sense of family, a shared history, and a common future, all seasoned with generous portions of roasted meat and the tangy kick of arag. These feasts were the glue that held the vast, sprawling Mongol Empire together, one shared meal at a time. As you drift now from the vast, sprawling encampments of the past, filled with the scent of roasting meat and the murmur of 1,000 voices, you might wonder if those epic feasts, those grand expressions of Mongol might and community, simply vanished with the empire's receding tide. But no, dear listener, the echoes of those nomadic banquets reverberate still, a deep, resonant hum across the steppes, influencing culture even today. It's like finding your favorite old band still touring, maybe with a few more wrinkles and a slightly slower tempo. But the hits are still there, the energy undeniable. You see, the very heart of Mongolian identity remains inextricably linked to its nomadic heritage, and nowhere is this more palpable than in its culinary traditions. That smoky, tender korhog, cooked with hot stones inside a sealed pot, isn't just a historical curiosity you'd read about in a dusty tome. Oh no, you can still find it bubbling away, perhaps not in a subterranean pit quite as often, but certainly in a large, heavy pot over an open flame, the stones pulled out glowing, ready to be passed around for good luck and warmth. And budog, that whole roasted marmot or goat, cooked from the inside out with hot stones inserted into its cavity, it's still a showstopper at special gatherings. A spectacle of culinary engineering that would make any modern chef swoon with a mix of awe and a healthy dose of, how on earth do they do that? It's the original slow cooker, if you will, just a whole lot more visceral. Then there's arag, that frothy, slightly sour, utterly essential fermented mare's milk. It's not just a drink. It's a handshake, a welcome, a toast to friendship and prosperity. You'll find it offered with genuine warmth in any yurt you visit across the vast Mongolian countryside. Even in Ulaanbaatar, the bustling capital, you can find arag, sometimes even pasteurized and bottled, though purists will tell you that's like trying to enjoy a rock concert through a tin can. The true experience involves a bowl passed hand to hand, the subtle tang hitting your palate, connecting you directly to millennia of nomadic hospitality. It's the original social lubricant, long before anyone invented a cocktail shaker. Perhaps the most vibrant, living testament to the enduring legacy of Mongol feasting is the Naadam Festival. This isn't just some quaint folk festival. It's a national celebration, held every summer, a direct descendant of those ancient military reviews and communal gatherings we spoke of earlier. You arrive at the Naadam grounds, and you're immediately enveloped by the scent of freshly cooked buz, those delightful steamed dumplings, often filled with mutton, and the sizzle of kushushur, the fried, meat-filled pastries. It's a sensory overload in the best possible way. The air crackles with excitement. You hear the thud of wrestlers, the thundering hooves of horse racers, the twang of bows, and everywhere, the joyous clamor of families sharing food and drink. This isn't just watching. It's participating in a living history. The Naadam Festival, with its 3 manly games of wrestling, horse racing, and archery, is a direct historical continuation of the training exercises and communal gatherings that underpin the military and social structure of the Mongol Empire. It's where warriors honed their skills and where communities bonded over shared challenges and, of course, shared feasts. What's truly fascinating is how these traditions persist even as Mongolia navigates the complexities of the 21st century. Urbanization has drawn many from the traditional nomadic lifestyle, yet the desire to connect with heritage, to share a meal that speaks of the land and ancestors, remains incredibly strong. You'll find families in apartment blocks meticulously preparing buz for holidays, just as their ancestors did in yurts. It's a quiet rebellion against the fast food culture, a deliberate choice to slow down and savor something deeply meaningful. There's also a quirky little detail about the stones used in Quirky and Budog. These aren't just any old rocks. They're often river stones, chosen for their ability to absorb and retain heat evenly, releasing it slowly to cook the meat to perfection. But here's the fringe tidbit. Many Mongolians believe that holding these hot, grease-slicked stones after the cooking process is complete is incredibly good for your health and circulation. You'll see people cupping them in their hands, passing them around like precious, warming talismans, the heat radiating through their palms, a silent blessing from the earth itself. It's a peculiar ritual, perhaps, but one steeped in generations of wisdom about warmth and well-being. And honestly, after a long day of chasing imaginary gazelles, who wouldn't want a hot stone massage for their hands? Historians still argue whether the Mongols' feasting habits directly influenced the widespread adoption of barbecue methods across Eurasia, or if it was a parallel development born of similar needs and available resources. Was it the Mongol horde that spread the love of slow-cooked, open-flame meat across the vast territories they conquered? Or were folks already enjoying their ribs and briskets in various forms, only to find the Mongols had perfected the art of cooking large quantities efficiently? It's a delicious debate, isn't it? But what's undeniable is the enduring legacy of their ingenious cooking techniques, which prioritize flavor, efficiency, and communal sharing. Beyond the specific dishes, the underlying philosophy of Mongol feasting, hospitality, generosity, and the forging of bonds through shared sustenance remains a cornerstone of Mongolian culture. You won't be long in Mongolia before someone, often a complete stranger, invites you into their home, their yurt, or even just offers you a cup of tea and a snack from their provisions. It's an ingrained reflex, a cultural imperative that harks back to the days when survival on the vast, unforgiving steppe depended on the kindness of strangers and the strength of community. To refuse such an offer is considered deeply impolite, akin to turning down a hug from your grandma if your grandma also happened to be a nomadic herder with a serious talent for making dumplings. The logistical genius required to feed an entire horde on the move has also left its subtle mark. The emphasis on portable, nourishing, and easily preserved foods like dried meat, borts, and various dairy products continues to define the traditional herder's diet. Even today, you'll find borts being carried on long journeys, a testament to its incredible energy density and longevity. It's the original power bar, just a little chewier and a lot more meaty. So, as you gently close your eyes, picture not just the ancient warriors, but their modern descendants, gathered around a steaming pot, sharing stories, laughter, and the rich, comforting flavors that have nourished their people for centuries. The clinking of bowls, the murmur of conversation, the warmth of shared food, these aren't just remnants of a bygone era. They are the living, breathing heart of a culture that knows the profound power of a good meal, a shared moment, and the enduring spirit of the steppe. The feast, in its essence, is a timeless act of connection, and in Mongolia, it continues to bind past, present, and future into a delicious, unforgettable whole. Now, as the last wisps of smoke from those ancient and modern hearths begin to gently fade, and the distant echoes of laughter and song grow softer and softer, you can feel a profound sense of peace settling over you. The vastness of the steppe, once so vibrant with life and the energy of grand celebrations, now stretches out in your mind, calm and still under the soft glow of a million stars. The flavors of smoked meat, the tang of fermented mare's milk, the comforting warmth of hot stones in your hand. These are not just memories of a story told, but gentle sensations that linger, inviting you to rest. You've journeyed through time, witnessed the incredible ingenuity and deep communal spirit of a people who understood the true meaning of sustenance, not just for the body, but for the soul itself. Let the images of bustling camps and shared meals slowly dissolve into the quiet comfort of your own space. The ancient world, with all its fascinating history, is now gently receding, making way for the tranquility of the night. Feel the gentle lull of your breath, a rhythm as old and steady as the nomadic migrations themselves. All is quiet, all is well.